You can't fake New York. Montreal, Toronto, I don't care where you go. New York is the best backdrop in the world, bar none. The excitement of the streets in New York is wonderful.
New York is a more iconic landscape to evacuate. Los Angeles looks empty almost any time, and certainly at 2 in the morning or 5:30 in the afternoon in the right spot, you can get an abandoned city. Never New York. New York is never quiet and never still. As such, it is an extraordinary place to show a different version of reality, a world where there are less or no people.
Folks, come on over here, folks, please. Thank you.
First of all, you need, between production assistants and traffic police and traffic enforcers, we had about 500 people just holding pedestrians from walking, holding cars from going. We had to age all the cars on the street. We had to put grass in the street. And it was very, very difficult. We had to start Saturday nights and start filming very early on Sunday mornings.
It's really cool because, like, how many times have you walked in the middle of the streets of New York where it's totally empty, it's like garbage around the floor, but it's actually funny because it's supposed to look abandoned, but like during the scenes, the PAs are trying to like hold back like thousands of people screaming for Will, and all these fans.
It was quite crazy, actually, to shoot walking in the middle of Fifth Avenue. It was quite amazing for me. It was, what? Like, we're closing Fifth Avenue?
Here we go, ready, and action.
Are you good? It's what's giving the intensity for the movie, because it's that look of no one around and so bizarre. I think it's gonna give the audience the wow. Like, I think it brings a feeling that those characters feel in that moment of this is a possible world of no one around and no life.
They died. The Dark Seekers got them. It was fascinating. I couldn't do anything.
I love that scene. I think it's the moment that she faces it. Maybe it didn't happen. And one of the things that I spoke to Francis is that St. Patrick's Cathedral for Anna is Taj Mahal. Is pure wonder, pure dream. Stories that she heard and heard and heard, and through that feeling, she created the hope inside her. So being there in that moment, in the first take for me, was really like, wow. I cried so much, like in the first take. And Francis kept to me, it's like, the first take. Because I think I was for so long in her body and in her mind and just waiting for that scene, and that created the character expectation for for over 2 years in that boat to get in that place. That when I got there, and it's such a beautiful cathedral, it's so big and so special, and it's in Fifth Avenue, and it's that I just started to cry. And I think that's why it's so special, because it's a moment of pure wonder, but at the same time, pure reality.
Right, you guys now all just see. If you can do that without filtering.
That's what I told her. I was like, now that's concentration right there. That's some real concentration.
We were a little surprised we got permission from St. Patrick's Cathedral. I think they responded to something in the script. There's a religious subtext to the story, and I think that struck a chord with them. They normally do not allow filming at St. Patrick's Cathedral.
And it was quite an experience. You know, we did it on a Sunday, and there was a lot of tourists around. And the amazing thing was everybody was quiet as we would roll. And this pretty incredible thing happened where we were shooting, and I would get caught up, and I'm watching the monitor and watching the take, and it goes on and on and on and on and on. And all you can see is empty Fifth Avenue, and Will and Elise and Charlie walking along, and it pans them off and up to St. Patrick's Church, and everything's empty and quiet. And as soon as we yell cut, I just heard this roar of applause. And I turned around, and there was thousands of people lined up just below where our monitors were on the opposite side of Fifth Avenue from St. Patrick's, all just waiting quietly. Nobody took pictures, nobody made a sound. It was incredible.
Fortunately, I only had to worry about the performance, and Akiva and JL had to worry about the actual production of going to the city and Mayor Bloomberg and trying to figure out how to actually make it happen. But it's visually stunning and arresting, and it just sells an idea of the classic human struggle with faith and science, and, you know, 5 sensory perception versus 6 sensory perception. And I think that we do, hopefully, a pretty good job of covering the bases and taking the audience to spiritual questions, but hopefully a catharsis at the end.
What?
They followed you home. They're dark seekers. They are dark seekers. So yeah, actually, they're not vampires. In the original novel, they were vampires.
Neville, during the day, he went to their hideout, or like the place they sleep, and he trapped them with cages. So when like they woke up, they thought like, oh, where's my family? Did that guy kill him? So they went out to get him.
When you hear that sound, you should just jump.
So this will be the sound that matches the sound we hear
At the haunted house, demolition derby, anytime they attack.
We've taken 2 armories, the Marcy Avenue Armory in Brooklyn and a Kingsbridge Armory in the Bronx. And we have built his whole interior of his home in Marcy, all 4 floors, and the basement and his lab.
It's an active armory. There are 2 drill floor areas. This particular drill floor area has been used as a set for movies for many years, though, so they're used to that. The other side, though, is, like I said, is still active. They still have drills here. And if there's a national emergency and they need to mobilize, then we take a backseat to that.
We have some metal shutters that he's supposed to be closing in front of his windows. We have rigs on that, so we buckle the shutters. We're going to have some debris coming through the cracks of the shutters as if the explosions outside are damaging his house.
Stand by, detonators. And detonating in 3, 2, 1.
We did a lot of research on modern bombs and trash can bombs and car bombs and things like that, and the kind of sound it would have and concussive waves that it would have. We're trying to get it as close as possible while being safe to, you know, a real bomb going on outside, so that, you know, Will can really react accordingly.
Underneath, over here, we have air springs underneath the floor. The high pressure air comes through here to the solenoids, and then when we hit the button, all of the air is rushed through to the air springs. On top of this, the floor moves up about 6 inches. All the set dressing goes up in the air, and Will Smith with it.
Here comes the duster machine. Okay, you got this, right? All right, good. Document it. 2, 1, bam! Oh.
I meant to press Damn. No, I have first-hand experience with that. Too close to the pyro.
Oh, really?
Too close to the pyro at the concert. It really throws your balance off. Like, it's like, you know, hey, what's up, Detroit? You know, y'all ready to party? Yeah. Boom.
We're discovering during the movie that even if it's a sci-fi movie with creatures, there's so many scenes with dramatic content.
Is there a split second of smelling or listening, or does he see them?
I think he sees them from up here. He senses them from up there, which is why you get the head.
There are stunt people involved in it, physical human beings, doing the basis of those movements during the whole of the shoot, although when you see them on the screen, they'll be adapted somewhat to look like creatures.
Part of my scenes are so dramatic and so deep and so intense, where she's trying to bring him close to her and saying, open your heart. You can have hope. You can't live without hope. Please listen to me. There is something out there. And that's the exactly moment that she's saying that. There is life. and she's talking about life and death.
You all right?
And in that exactly moment, they attack the house.
They're coming! They're coming!
They're quite trapped. It's a house, it's dark around, they're coming inside. So it's the kind of feeling of where can you go?
Finally, what is most important is performance. And Will knows how to create from within him an inability to give up. Because I think Will as a man is unable to give up. And that's something that can't really be faked.
I guess what first appealed to me about the story was the idea of a man surviving alone in an urban environment. I've always been fascinated by that idea for a long time, and I was reading books like Earth Abides, and I had read Richard Matheson's novel.
When I was a teenager, and I saw Dracula with Bela Lugosi, and it just occurred to me, if one vampire is scary, if the whole world was full of vampires, that would really be scary.
I remember watching The Omega Man when I was a kid and just being so startled by those opening sequences of Charlton Heston driving down the street and shooting. Years later, of course, I've discovered that if you look very closely, you can see homeless people wandering in the background of those shots. But for its time, it was really extraordinary. And I called up Francis Lawrence, who had directed Constantine, and we'd worked together on that movie, and that was really fun. And we sort of sat down and started rethinking I Am Legend, trying to keep the fundamentals of the story, and at the same time doing some drastic surgery, like moving it to New York.
The idea of the last man on Earth, you know, there's something about that that's one of those really ingrained, collective, unconscious, awful fantasy nightmare things.
We really wanted to harken back to the more serious science fiction of, say, the 50s or the 70s. Serious science fiction was a very popular genre when I was growing up. Wonderful, strong science fiction movies that were character dramas. This is a tradition that really began in some ways with The Twilight Zone, this idea of using science fiction as allegory. It's a wonderful way of reflecting our society back at us, but making it palatable because it's somewhat other, it's outside of us.
I love doing research. You find things in real life that you could never create. And it's difficult if you don't do the research to really understand how a person gets into that position and to have to try to survive after he was the one who, in his mind, he was the one who lost it. You know, he lost his sight. He couldn't save humankind.
No! Sam, no!
The possibility of life after loss, or the feeling of no possibilities of life after loss, and the level of loss that Robert Neville has experienced, and to try to die that death and to find the rebirth, it's just beautifully symbolic of life and our everyday struggle. So to be able to put all that depth in a movie where you have vampires was beautiful.
Cars moving, watch yourselves.
It's the Shelby. It's a 2008. It's got 550 horses. We changed. I can't give away all the secrets. We did a little work to it, but it's sweet.
The first day of shooting was pretty amazing. It was actually a second unit day with Vic, our action unit director, who was starting to shoot a lot of the exterior elements of sort of the opening joyride.
Shooting this particular sequence was a bigger challenge than most because we do, in car chases, you have a storyline, there's the thrill of other vehicles racing at you, swerving around them, whereas on I Am Legend car chase we're doing, it's not really a car chase, it's the wrong word for it. It was called the Joyride. There's nobody to steal it from anymore.
The car is going through down Fifth Avenue on the next green light. Please be aware.
Even though we were shooting from 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning onwards on weekends, it was very tricky in that respect, stopping New Yorkers walking around their street.
I remember standing there, I came in and they were doing a shot with the car racing down the middle of the street, which was kind of fun.
Cut on rehearsal, keep it locked.
And hearing them lock up, they had, 150 PAs or something all at the different streets.
Clearing this corner, Action.
Just seeing it barren. That was a pretty amazing sight.
But it was also a safety problem. You know, we're going down these streets at 60, 70 miles an hour in a Mustang, and you know, you don't want the pizza delivery boy to cross the road with a pizza on the front and end up as a hood ornament.
Picture's next. Next picture is up.
Oh, son of a gun, he grabbed it.
Ah, boy.
Don't give him any adjustment.
Keep going, buddy. Okay, watch out for the antifreeze here.
Yeah, that's the backup car around the corner. We had 2 jumps today. Second one, I'm a little happier with. Okay, you got a little bit more power, a little bit more speed, and people seem to like it more. That's high. Woo! I like that. That's high. That's high. It's a great landing. Killed another car, though.
We had to have this moment where some deer run across the road, which will be computer-generated deer, and it makes Will Smith swerve, and he goes into sort of a 360, 520 spin.
Probably about 20% of the driving you see in the movie I'm doing. Then there's other rigs and stuff.
The secret of doing good action in any genre is making sure that you see the lead artist is in that shoot, because people, when they go to the movies, they're going to come and see Will Smith in this movie. So what the Go-Mobile does gave us the opportunity of putting Will Smith in the driving seat of the Shelby Mustang.
All right, here we go. Stand by.
But because the way the Go-Mobile is configured, we had an expert stunt driver driving the Go-Mobile from another position.
Drive down, I'll give you an action cue. You pull away, and you'll say 3, 2, 1, deer, and then swerve right after deer.
Yep. It's quite a clever configuration. It's had another steering wheel and driving unit, which is totally separate from the one that Will Smith is sitting in, which is the proper car. In my mind, I just put me over here, thinking I'm there. Not that Will Smith probably couldn't have done the driving. You know, he's a good enough driver. But at the same time, with the lights on the car, you know, the visibility is actually down to 0 for the actor. And at the same time, he has to act. So it gave us the opportunity to put Will in the situation realistically, rather than just having a blue screen and placing the fast-moving background behind him like they used to do in the old days.
Woo! Oh, yeah, we got that one.
Well, this is Abby. She's German Shepherd, working in the picture I Am Legend.
There's a dog in half the movie, and that was a big worry because, you know, you always worry, okay, well, we can work with the actors, we can, you know, lock all these locations, but then we have a dog that might not do what we want it to do.
Stay.
Having worked on a lot of animal pictures, I know how difficult it is to do things, and the repetition and how bored animals get with it, or how they have a mind of their own. They might not want to do something they've rehearsed for weeks and weeks. That's just nature.
Hey, Abby, come on over here. Come here.
Steve Barrett has trained the 2 dogs we've got fantastically well. I've been watching them, and I'm lucky I'm sitting on the sidelines watching poor Steve go through the grinder.
Leave it, stay, watch, stay, back up, back.
I have to say the dog, you know, has been fantastic.
Stay, stay.
It's very rare we actually have a problem with the dog or we don't get the dog to do what we want. There's actually 3 dogs. We have Abby and Kona and Sammy, and Abby's sort of the hero dog. We use her most of the time.
We definitely go through the script. We break down all of the scenes. We try to get a feel of what's important for those particular scenes, and then we use different techniques to pull that emotion out of her during that scene. I might teach her to close her mouth, lower her head, as if she's starting to stalk something.
And action on the dog!
Abby, come on, let's go! It's the same way that you would prepare an athlete who's going to have, you know, 5 races in a particular day. You can't prepare him for 20 minutes a day and then all of a sudden have those 5 races. They're not ready. So you prepare them for those days they're going to go through in your prep, the amount of time that you're putting into it. If you use a ball, that in essence is prey to them. It could be a rabbit, or it could be a ball. And so we might use a ball as a reward for that kind of a feel as she's moving for that. The whole idea is that it is work, but it's fun. Dogs that I train, the second you get up and head to the door, they're right with you. They want to go, and it's an adventure. It's like going out for the hunt. You want to create that camaraderie and that feeling of togetherness, and then you pass that on to the actor. We try to portray this animal that really, there is nothing left for her except this one person. And one of the most important things with a film like this, when you're working with an actor the level of Will that's been nominated a couple times, you really need to stay out of his way. Get your work done and get their relationship across, but really allow him to have the freedom to act. The actual fight is going to be CG work, but then we cut in and we see Abby by the car, and at that point, that is special effects makeup. First of all, everything we're putting on her is safe for the dog, so if she does lick any of it, it's not going to hurt her. And then secondly, we'll start with small pieces hanging off of her fur and little objects and things, and get her to work and do her scenes, ignoring those things.
But for me, it's a lot easier because a lot of the savage attacks will be with a CG type of dog, but I hate the sequence because it reminds me of Old Yeller, and it's so sad. It makes me feel like crying. I've never forgotten Old Yeller when I saw it as a little kid, you know.
The approach that Francis has taken is that it's not dark and dismal. It's actually gone back to nature. So there's grass growing on 42nd Street. There's birds and deer running through the streets of Manhattan. So there's the wish fulfillment in that aspect.
We're looking for the busiest areas, and the areas that'll give the largest scale for that approach. We're talking about 42nd Street and Grand Central. We're talking about the Flatiron area, 23rd and Broadway. We're talking about 14th Street, where the High Line is. We're talking about Fifth Avenue. So the elements in New York that make the most dramatic statement, because we're trying to show it not just empty, but the effect of 3 years of neglect.
We did some research, and I knew that I wanted to take a really naturalistic approach to this movie. And, you know, there's a very easy way of making Manhattan empty, which is that you shoot everything on a stage and you just add it all later. And I didn't want to do that at all, because it feels like a very different kind of movie, and it doesn't really feel natural. Beyond that, we have this idea that the city's not just empty, but it's been years, and that nature's actually reclaiming the city. So, added on this empty city is nature. There's a lot of extra things that we're having to add to, you know, each and every environment that we empty out.
First, you have to dress the street. We have to lay the street in with abandoned cars. We have to apply 3 years' worth of muck to those cars. We have to dress storefronts and building facades. We have to bring in artificial greens to make it look like grass and weeds are busting up through cracks in the sidewalk. And a lot of this stuff has to be done on the overnight, because the city streets during the day are very busy, and the mayor's office gives us certain windows of opportunity within which we can actually control traffic. We never did anything in a small way on this movie. Every time we hit the street, it was big, because it was an empty, post-apocalyptic environment. So it was quite a challenge every place we went.
With Neville, what we sort of decided was that this guy has kind of structured himself a routine. And he's very disciplined about that routine. You know, he sort of sets alarms and he does certain things, and he's very orderly, and he keeps his house in order. And it's what sort of keeps him as sane as possible in a situation like this. And so part of that is the way he eats, you know, the discipline about working out and his body, you know, his haircut, the way he keeps his hair close. All those things are, you know, extreme choices for somebody who leads a very disciplined life. And it's almost as if that, you know, if that routine were to start to break down, the guy would actually fall apart.
In the beginning, when the plague was beginning to decimate everybody, he had a wife and a child. And it was that responsibility that kept him going. So it's conceivable that once they had died, he was so in the habit of surviving on a day-to-day basis that he just did it without thinking, although he did consider suicide many times.
Francis was probably the first person to bring it up, the idea that everything is actually plentiful. You know, he has access to all things, and he wouldn't have to take anything because it's going to be there when he goes back. So the idea of setting up, you know, there's a medical supply. So he knows that this is where medicine is, this is where canned goods are, and this, you know, this is where gasoline storage, and that he actually uses the entire city as his home. It gives a real sense of authenticity and realism to it. So he's essentially systematically sweeping the city, and he's basically taking inventory. As an actor, I feel like I'm, you know, my grandmother used to say, growing like a weed. So I feel, you know, I feel like I'm growing like a weed as an actor right now. It's just a beautiful exercise to not be able to talk, to have to figure out how to communicate things without talking, to have to search for behavior. You know, for me, it is, you know, the center of what acting is. So it's actually given me a wonderful opportunity, almost like Buddhism, where you just be quiet for a while, and if you just shut up, you'll start to discover a whole lot of things.
What's interesting about Will, and what I think he's doing an amazing job of in this movie is, you know, a lot of people would just take to this role and brood. And it might be interesting, but it would be very shallow. And what's fantastic about Will is that he has such a warmth to him and such a charisma to him that even when he does that, it has so many layers. You know, there's real sympathy for him.
This is the second movie that Will and I have worked on together. We worked on iRobot, and we're going off this into Tonight He Comes. And the reason we find each other again and again is we have very similar orientation, and that is a kind of thoroughness of imagination. We like to really explore the minutia of everything, from scene to motivation, to dialogue, to background. And Francis turns out to love the same thing, so it's been really a wonderful match. And so it's been hours and hours of myself, Will's partner James Lasseter, Francis, and Will, all just imagining ourselves into this world. Well, what would you look for? Where would it be? How would you document it? Where would you put it? What would you take? What would you leave? Where would you go? And we tried to turn it over and over and over again, vetting it and sort of throwing it against the shoals of our own skepticism until some things endured. And hopefully those are the things that will endure in the movie as well.
The scene that we're working on tonight is the scene where Will's family is being evacuated from the city prior to the city being quarantined. This is kind of the last chance for Will to get his family off the island.
We had to have the speed of this convoy going from Washington Square to the pier. We shot the background plates for that, which in fact is the most cameras I've ever used on one vehicle. We had 13 cameras. It's just not practical to shoot that sort of thing at night. You think, well, how the heck do we get all these plates? We can't do it 6 or 7 times. We just don't have the time of keep moving the cameras around and doing the same run. So we came up with this idea, which I'd used once before on War of the Worlds, and we had just a panorama. But on War of the Worlds, we only had 8 cameras. This time we went for broke and had 13 cameras. So it was a huge, great machine that we drove down through Mulberry Street, and we were missing cars by inches, and then we put those behind the scene you see with the family in the car.
Keep the colonel and his family between us and don't let anyone stop you.
Hey guys, let's test fire. Fire in the hole!
The military branches that provide us the vehicles and the additional hardware that we get can provide everything except the weapons. This is Hollywood. We don't use real guns on set, so all of the weapons are not provided by the military. They're brought to us by a company called Weapons Specialists here in New York. It would be improper and overly dangerous to have real weapons on set.
Yep.
Prior to the film starting shooting, we brought in the producers, the directors, the ADs to go through the various types of weapon systems that we thought would be appropriate for this film. Originally, we had thought about going with a larger gun to really convey the sense that he's looking to put them down for good. We found a nice balance with the M4 weapon system as both agile and light enough to be on him at all times, and yet have enough downrange stopping power to serve his needs as Robert Neville. Once we had settled on that, we built up some guns with special accessories and kind of a distinctive silhouette. We customized it a little bit with a special optic system. Obviously, we had to integrate a lighting system for it, since a lot of the film takes place in the dark, and that's where the bad guys live.
Set, ready, and action.
Obviously, Will has extensive firearms experience from the various films that he's been working on in the past, and his weapon handling skills are remarkable. He's a pleasure to work with. For this film, we actually had to kind of change his style of weapons handling because his character has been alone for over 3 years, so we had to kind of relax some of the safety protocols that apply in normal society because he is the only man alive as far as he's aware. Once he interfaces with Elise and Ethan during the later part of the film, we change his style back to one where he has to be more in control and more concerned about what he may be covering with his gun and where his rounds are going.
For this angle, just cheat.
We suggested tower video. The geography of the store seemed to work better for the scene. It's actually in Greenwich Village. The streets are not as busy as certain of our other more congested locations, and the store owners were cooperative enough to allow us to close the store down for a couple of days.
Shut the door, right?
The perspective that we've landed on is Neville is not trying to fight these things. He's not a superhero who's trying to go in and fight. The last thing he wants to do is have to interact with these things. He's fighting for survival. And when somebody's fighting for survival, it has a different look to it.
I think when the audience meets Neville, he is pretty ragged. I think he's been suffering the sort of reliving of this loss and the dullness that it has created in him and the sort of sense of suspended time that loss always creates. He's been living this over and over again for 3 years. So we meet him at a pretty low point, and from that moment on, things just get worse.
You realize that in your entire life, you've never seen an empty picture of New York. And it just gives so much depth and power to the idea and getting it inside to that scary place inside of all of us.
Hey, Marge, hey, Fred.
To really search for the reality of the situation. It was scary and it was beautiful, and so many different genres inside of it. It was a horror movie, a science fiction, a wonderful art character piece, and it just has so many elements to it.
See you guys inside.
That's a cut.
Cut.
There's nobody there.
We talked to a lot of experts about how people learn how to survive, through isolation and the kinds of things and routines they come up with and things that they should do in a routine, especially someone educated who would come up with a game plan for their day. And one of the things was always entertainment.
Let's go get it.
And when you're the last man alone in New York City, there is some fun to be had, albeit lonely fun. And so one of the ideas we came up with is Will's a golfer, so we said, okay, golf, and we thought maybe off the library steps, and then we thought, okay, maybe that's not spectacular enough. So I was driving up the West Side Highway one day and saw the Intrepid, and remember that they had a stealth fighter. So I thought, hey, maybe it's kind of cool if he goes up and hits golf balls off the back of a stealth fighter and off into the city, which is kind of nice.
Oh, yeah. It's coming together.
The Intrepid is, of course, the Intrepid Air, Sea, and Space Museum. It's a World War II aircraft carrier, and what's great about the Intrepid is it's a commanding view of the west side of Manhattan. You get a lot of cityscape there.
I also really like the idea, too, on top of it all, that we're seeing these elements that are, seemingly so important to the world now. But actually, if a pandemic like this happened and the world were sort of to go away, something that we spend so much time and energy and worry and billions of dollars building, these kinds of weapons, that they're now just kind of sitting here rotting, and they're absolutely useless.
There is no pier in the East River alongside the Brooklyn Bridge, so we had to make one. We brought a barge in, we anchored it to the riverbed, attached a gangway from the barge to the shoreline, which is a promenade area. To pull that one off required the cooperation of city, state, and federal agencies, I think, to a degree unprecedented in New York.
It's 290 feet long, 40 feet wide, and it's connected by a 65-foot bridge, which I'm sitting on right now. We've anchored it in as our pier for the evacuation scene.
People that are accepted are going to go on the barge 45 at a time. So,
this scene probably took about 2.5 months to prep and organize, and we have to get permits from about 9 to 10 different organizations, like the Coast Guard, the City of New York, the Harbor Unit, the Economic Development Corporation, everybody. It's huge.
You know, the briefs are on the call sheet again: helicopter, water, cold weather. And when we say cold weather tomorrow night, we mean it now.
The idea was always that quarantine happened at Christmas. And so when we started working on this film, we knew we wanted the majority of the film to sort of take place in late summer, so that it would really sharply contrast the flashbacks of when people are around, which were Christmas. And so when we scheduled it, we said, you know what, we should really do it around Christmas. So you could see breath, and if we're out on the streets, there can really be Christmas decorations, which there were. But immediately, as we started shooting, we were all dreading coming back from our holiday hiatus and having to go to, you know, shoot under the Brooklyn Bridge on the East River in mid-January, when the, you know, New York weather is going to be at its worst. And it was cold.
we're going to have a last mark where if you pass this back fence, you have to have a life jacket on.
Working conditions are really hard because 3 sides of this set are completely water. So there are safety issues. This is something that's right next to the Brooklyn Bridge. We have hundreds and hundreds of extras that are coming out on the barge and trying to evacuate. A helicopter's landing at the same time. So logistically putting it together, it's quite a lot of things to juggle.
Just so everybody knows, I have 3 divers on each side. If you see somebody go in, yell man overboard, and do not take your eyes off of them at all.
Never look up or lose sight of them. We're counting on you to track where they are.
So let's stay safe and stay dry and try to stay warm.
The military was great. They were wildly cooperative. I mean, the Pentagon was great. For the most part, the soldiers you see are real soldiers. The Coast Guard are real Coast Guard. And we try to follow protocols that would be the protocols should there be a quarantine of this sort.
The 69th National Guard unit here in New York City, which would be the unit that would actually had this job should it ever come to it, was kind enough to allow us to hire their troops in an off-duty status. The unit that we actually got our troops from came back from Iraq about 10 months ago. They fought valiantly, but they're trained as National Guards in addition, so urban peacekeeping and this type of operation falls under their purview should they be activated by the governor. Having them here makes my job and the production's job so much easier.
Scan her again. Scan her again. What the National Guard gives us is they have a dual job on this movie. They are background, they are actors in our movie, but they are also a great support of moving the crowd through and being realistic of what the crowd needs to do. So they'll move the crowd through just like they're securing any other place and evacuating. So it's like a real operation for them.
Directly behind me is a Stryker assault vehicle. This is the first time any film has had a Stryker in it. It is the newest armored personnel carrier, and it will carry our troops into battles for decades to come. This one was particularly hard to get because pretty much everyone that comes off the line is heading overseas in support of our troops. These were lent to us by the National Guard unit at Fort Indiantown Gap. They brought in a field support team to assist us in utilizing them on set. And the Department of Defense and the U.S. government lends it to us on a cost reimbursement basis. So the production is not renting the equipment, but it doesn't cost the taxpayers anything for it to be here.
Rolling. Action will.
I always like to stay in shape. You know, I have a motto: if you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready. You know, so that's usually how I do it. When it's time to make a movie, I'm 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out from being where I want to be. I trained with Daryl Foster. He trained me for Ali and iRobot. So we've been working together for years, and you know, he keeps me pretty tight.
We came up with the idea that he would actually be very physically fit because he had to survive, always trying to be looking out for the dark seekers. But he would be drained where he wasn't living an abundant life, you know, as far as foods were concerned, just eating to live. In conjunction with the training and physical look for the body, we try to incorporate the mind because intense training can sometimes pull you out of character. So what was great for this particular movie was we just put him in desperate straits where it was oxygen deprivation, heat, all kind of adverse conditions, boxing training, martial art training, whatever would drain him down, and then weight training around 5 o'clock in the evening. We wanted him tired. So when he hit New York for filming, character development, he was already ready. We do the cardio first thing in the morning, but sometimes it's a tug and war determining on how intense the dialogue is. Cutting your carbohydrate intake can make you flub your lines because the brain actually needs oxygen and glucose. So it's very tricky there. If you know you've got some intense scenes, but it has to be a drained part of the movie, on the weekends, we don't take that downtime. We got to go get the 10, 15 miles that it takes in order for him to come with the look. And then that Monday, we're actually up his carbs. So he has the look, but then he has the nutrition he needs in order to do pages and pages of dialogue.
Go get it, go get it!
I've worked with professional fighters, martial artists, worked 18 years with Sugar Ray Leonard. I've never met, next to Ray, anybody that is as committed to his craft as Will Smith. Never complains.
So you got everything in the front? You good in the front?
Yeah, we're gonna get cross on you guys, okay?
It's an airbrush solution, and he's slightly infected.
You know, we've made a couple of significant changes from the novel. We just felt that the vampire as a result of infection was no longer new. So we tried to find symptomatology that replicated opportunistically the most terrifying, the most interesting, the most beguiling characteristics of those who were infected in Matheson's novel, but sort of move it into today.
I think the major changes are in filming. They can do things now that they never could before, which makes it much more believable. Put them out of their misery much more expeditiously than with a stake.
They are dark seekers. They are infected with a virus that is a mutation and a connection of retrofitted measles that made contact with dormant rabies, and it has created what we call the KV virus.
Do that. Go up on the top of your head again.
She's a dark seeker, and I'm trying to find a new serum, and I'm testing the GA series serum 391 compound 6. And it doesn't work, and she flatlines. And then I hit her with the epi, you know, she comes back. But I'm very sad because I've been here for 3 years by myself, and the world is crumbling around me, and I'm supposed to be the savior, but I ain't saving nothing. So it's a hard day for me today. Let's watch.
And you see you pop up there?
Yeah, Mike,
We began the movie thinking we were going to make the creatures with prosthetics and applications, and after our first few days of second unit filming, we looked at the footage and suddenly realized it looked like Attack of the Angry Mimes.
In some ways, changing the creatures from human beings to computer-generated creatures made my life easier. The creatures have to do things that are abnormal, so therefore we have to try and make humans do abnormal things. Also, there's the demolition derby, as we call it, where Will Smith takes his 4x4 and just smashes into these creatures and knocks them up in the air, runs them over. That would have set a whole new lot of problems of how we do that many car hits, how it's safe to do that, make it look spectacular. So I'm glad we came to that decision. You have to have a semblance of reality to it. It's just how we shoot it. It takes a lot of working out.
Oh, great.
Well, what's happening in the sequence for the film is that they've conscripted basically everything that'll float to get people off of the island. Tier 1 personnel are being taken off the island by aircraft. So at the top of the scene, we've got a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter that lifts off in the beginning of the sequence. As Will's family moves through the scene, this Coast Guard helicopter comes in. We actually do a lot of work right under the aircraft itself while it's turning, and then we load Will's family onto it for their evac off of the island. Coast Guard is providing both aircraft and watercraft for us. The watercraft are mostly working in a standoff position as a backdrop for the scene itself.
And then right when we start rolling, I want to have you do a hard twist around, and just for while we're filming, hold your stern toward Pier 17 for continuity.
Will's family is actually being evacuated in a Coast Guard H-65 Dolphin helicopter. That helicopter is being loaned to us under our agreement with DOD from the Atlantic City Air Station, and they are just top flight guys. They unbelievably helpful, giving us everything that we need for the film and doing it with a smile. These guys train non-stop. They're top of their game. The flight crews come in, they work with our aerial coordinators, they fly the exact proper flight path every time. Their repeatability is flawless. It is really a pleasure to work with them.
I think Neville has convinced himself that he is the last man alive, even though statistically that's pretty unlikely. Much of the human race is gone. He knows that. He's a physician. But for him to actually be the last person on the planet, well, that would be pretty difficult. And yet, he believes that. So I think quite naturally we believe it for a good bit of the beginning of the movie. But as it starts to be exposed to the light of reason, both Neville and the audience sort of comes pretty quickly to the idea that, well, probably not. There's probably someone else out there.
What I love is the conflict between desperately desiring human contact, but fear of human contact. And that, that was something we discovered also in the research, that people generally who have been in solitary confinement or we did POW research, you actually reject contact. It's your deepest desire, your deepest dream when you're in the situation, but the second that you're free to have that contact, there's a huge rejection of it. It's almost like cold water. And that dichotomy is just a wonderful psychological place to explore as an actor.
Come on.
The previous night, he had an awful hallucination. So there's uncertainty. He hopes that they're real, but not certain that they're real. And then it crosses his mind, well, if I shoot them, then I could be certain whether they're real or not. But wait, if I shoot them and they're real, oh, damn, then that would kill him. So it's like all of that. The bizarre psychology is just, it was like a playground for me.
What Lisey has is real authenticity and beauty and a kind of kindness. There's a glow to her, which is palpable. I think it's recognizable in the room and on screen. There's kind of a light there.
She makes a decision and just go and save him, even if the Darkseekers are around. Just throw them lights and save him. It's a choice. It's trusting the unknown. For me, that's the belief. Trusting in the unknown. I think she makes that decision in that moment when she saves him.
She represents hope in the movie. That is to give him something to want again.
I really got passionate about her passion to life, her desire to keep alive, and her hope for something else. And especially talking about Ethan, the little boy, her care for someone else. Because that relationship shows that she's a really generous person.
This movie's been complex, but actually all the things that I think people have been most worried about with this, which is, there's a child in the movie, and but he's been fantastic.
I mostly follow Anna around a lot, so it's only for a few days that I don't trust Neville enough, but in a few scenes he knows that I don't trust him, so he tries to make me laugh and does all this silly stuff in the scenes.
We don't show their story in the movie, but I created in the back of my mind how she got him. Why this 20-something years old girl has a kid, and how they survived in in that creature's world. Will is big and he's strong, so it's easier in a way for a man to survive. For a girl and a boy, I really got passionate for her strength.
Before we started filming the movie, just to kind of get to know me and stuff, she took me out for ice cream one day after one of the rehearsals. That was the first time I met her. She's always like hugging me. She's really nice.
Everybody that sort of asks who's in the movie, what's happening, you say Will Smith, they go, oh wow, is he here today? And it suddenly breaks the ice and everybody sort of has a bit more tolerance.
He's really fun. He's a really nice guy. And he makes up all these funny songs. Like, whenever I come on the set, he's like, Charlie says. And he's like, he's really fun.
Who's supposed to be at work?
He will talk to people, he will stop, he will sign autographs. He's the most generous guy I've ever been around. And he makes my job 100% easier.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, Steve, the dog on me on the last take, man.
Oh, we'll take
I was
care.
wondering if you could handle, like, because it was all over the front of me on the last take. You got that?
I have an assistant take care of it.
Okay, thanks, man, because it was just all in the scene. Thanks a lot, man.
Thank you.
I think on that note we've cut.